I want to start talking about creating a real-time strategy game. I'm going to dedicate a large portion of this channel to it now. And I have the course that I had started working on a while ago based on Unity 5.5, and a lot of my coding practices have changed, and I was also trying to shortcut a lot of things in there. And this time I really want to improve things, make it so this is really top-notch quality. So we'll be dealing with things like the artificial intelligence, high-quality visuals, and we're also going to try to work primarily with free assets, so anyone can follow along and get pretty much the exact same results I am. All right, so that's a video of some of the stuff, the experiments I was heading off into, the proof of concept. Let's get started on the actual game. All right, I'm going to create a new project. It's going to be 3D URP, and I am using Unity 2021.3.8. It should work with any of the 2021.3s, but that's the latest LTS that's available at the time I'm recording this video. The project name for this one is going to be RTS Course, and let's go with D. RTS Cursed. Perfect. All right. Let's get started by cleaning some stuff up. I'm going to delete the README file that comes with it. I'm also going to get rid of the tutorial info that comes with it. And now this universal file that comes with it, I'm going to push that into settings. Now I'm going to set up my own folder for where I'm going to put all of my content, which will be !RTS. And I'm going to drag the settings and the scene folders both into this. All right, now there is an asset that I'm going to want to pull in. Let me bring that one up. That is over here. It's a free asset. Anyone should have this available to you. You can just go onto the Unity Asset Store and look for this material of Yugi's free metal materials, if I'm saying that right. Anyway, I'm going to open in Unity. All right, here it is. I'm going to import this now. Import again. All right, great. So I have that metal material imported now. This is great for a sci-fi RTS game. All right, now I'm going to fix all of the content that came in because it's URP, and the materials I just pulled in are not. So I'm going to click all materials. You can see most of them are coming up pink. I'm going to select one, hit Control A, and then go to Edit, Rendering, Materials, Convert Selected Built-in Materials to URP. Proceed. Okay, they've been updated. Next, I'm going to start building out part of the level. That's what I'm going for this first video. So to start with, let's create a cube. All right, I've got my cube in there, and I'm going to set its size to about 10 by 10 by 10. It's 10 meters by 10 meters, so that gives me plenty of area to work with on this. All right, now I'm going to give it a material, and I've liked this material when I've been using it. Now, for the way that it looks. So I don't want to just use the material as it exists, because the actual location for this one is located over in, where is that? Asset, Yugi's free metal materials. So I'm going to put that in my own. Let's go over to here, and we will create a folder called materials. All right, so I have the materials. I need to correct that name, or the typo. Now let's go back into Yugi's free materials and drag this one over, because this is one I'm going to want to keep using. Actually, I'm going to leave that one there, and I'll hit Control D to duplicate, and then drag the new one over to our materials, which got dragged into the wrong folder. There it goes. Now I'm going to call this one Platform. I'm also going to name the cube Platform. All right, now I'm going to drag, right now the cube has its material still set to that M_YFMMM01. I'm going to drag in this new one to it, and now it's Platform. All right, so I'm controlling this. Next, I need to start setting up the lighting for this cube. Okay, so for the lights, I'm going to right click and add a light. I'll give it a spotlight. And now by default, it's set up over here. I'm going to rotate its X by 90 so it points down, and then I'm going to give it a height of 20. That brings it up and over. Now it's way up here. Let's drag this back so I can actually see it. And 20 I think is too far. Let's change that to 5. 5 looks better. There we go. All right, so I've got that asset there. It's set up, but this light doesn't reach it, so I need to get that to reach it. So let's extend the distance, which right now it has a range of 10. Now let's increase the range to right around there. You can see it's covering up part of this, but that's also a pretty wide view of this. I don't want it to have all of that, so let's decrease this amount of space. I really want the lines to be right inside of the square, only sticking outside of the square when it's on the flat parts and never the corners. So let's start decreasing the angle. There, that looks good to me. Now, we're not really going to be able to tell the lighting because we have a lot of lights in the scene. So let's start getting rid of them. First of all, I'm going to disable I'm just going to destroy the directional light that comes in the scene. Now I'm also going to go to the main camera. And the main camera, you can see it has some background lighting in it. Let's expand this stuff out. I believe it's environment. There we go. Skybox. I'm going to switch to solid color, which is blue by default, and I'm going to change it to black. So we're using darkness as a common theme inside of here, and that's partly to deal with fog of war. All right, so now that we've got that, but there's still ambient light all over the place. So let's go edit our light settings. We go into Windows, Rendering, Lighting, and let me drag this up so we can actually see where it is. All right, from here in the Lighting tab, I'm going to go to Environment, and it goes to a skybox material by default. I'm going to delete that. So we have no skybox source for light. Next, I'm going to change the shadows to black. And now I'm also going to change the environment lighting source to color, and then the ambient color to black. So now this is completely invisible. It's just dark. If I go to game view, you can't see anything. This is a great point just to point out this particular button. If I hit this button, I can see the scene as it's lit with our lighting. If I turn it off, I can see the objects again. That's very helpful when designing. So I can see the lights on here, but I can't tell what it's actually hitting. It doesn't seem to be doing much. So I'm going to turn it back into this mode. And now let's edit with the inspector and start increasing the intensity. And now you can see that the light is coming up. The intensity on this needs to be pretty high for a value because it's so far away. In fact, let's keep it up there. So let's go with about maybe 500. So that's still got some pretty dark edges on here, which I kind of like. We'll probably have to come back and change this again though. All right, so now we've got that platform, we've got the light on here, and now we're gonna want to move these around. So I'm gonna, let's see. I need to be able to move this, but look, the transform tool is missing. Why is it missing? That is because we are currently set up on center instead of pivot. So when it was on center, I'll click here and zoom out a little bit, and you can see it's centered between the light, which we can't even see where that is at the moment. There it is. And the cube. So we're just going to put it back to pivot, so it's on the root object here. All right, so I have that on this spot, and now I'm going to duplicate this, Control D, and drag it over. Now, the snapping doesn't work very well. If I do free flow, you can see it can get any decimal place like 0.73, not what I want. If I'm holding Control, then it comes in 0.25 increments. Again, not quite what I want. Let's go change the values here. So over on this section, we can change what the actual snapping is. So in this case, this is 10 wide, so I'm going to go for 10. And all of them match up. I don't want all of them to match up completely. I'm going to go with 2 here and be able, so I can start to just drag this around. There we go. Now Control D, and I can duplicate again, and it just snaps into the places I want to. Now this is great if this size object were the only thing I were ever going to edit in here, but it's not. So I want to make a separate script that when I drag around a particular type of object, it will be manipulated as if it had snap settings custom to its own needs. All right, so let's go build that script. Inside of here, I need to create our first script folders. So folder, and we're going to call it scripts. Next, I'm going to right click in here. Oh, I have a typo in there. Let's rename that. There we go, scripts. Now I'm going to create a C# script called grid snap assist. All right, grid snap assist. Now I'm going to delete 3 of these platforms. One of the things that we should do right away is turn this into a prefab because we're duplicating it and we're going to make changes, so we don't have to keep doing this a lot. So I'm going to create a new folder called prefabs. Then I'm going to drag platform into the prefabs and then put the prefabs folder directly under RTS. Okay, so we've got this in there, and now I want to add that script. So where are my scripts? I'm going to drag grid snap over here onto the actual object and then go to overrides and apply all. All right, so now let's set the code for it. Okay, so this object, we're not going to have it working all the time. The only time that this particular one needs to work is during the editing. So I'm going to get rid of some of the extra things in here, and I'm also going to put in some extra code on this. I'm going to get rid of what we have. Let's delete that. And now let's put in an if statement. Hashtag if Unity_editor. So this code will only run in the editor. It's not going to compile and get sent out when this goes to release. All right. Now I'm going to duplicate that line. And one of the reasons that I duplicate this line is because I prefer to have the end if statement also include the keyword. All right. Now I've got this, and let's start putting in the code. So the first off, we need to know what we're snapping to. So it's going to be different for up and down versus left, right, forward, and backwards. So let's go create a vector 3. Public vector 3, and we'll call this snap size equals new vector 3, and we're going to call it not new vector 3. We'll just say vector 3.1 times 10, because 10 was our most common value that we've had so far. All right. Now, we also want an offset. That's something that the current one doesn't have in it. So I'm going to add an offset to this. So public vector 3 offset equals vector 3.0. All right, so those are our 2 public values. Now, we want this to change any time that we're changing one of the values on it, and there's 2 places that it changes. One is in the transform, and the other is when we're changing the mono behavior itself. So let's create an onValidate function. Private void onValidate. So onValidate gets updated or executed every time that we end up making a change to our specific component. So let's start setting with this. First of all, I know that our math function is going to need to do division. So I want to make sure that we're not going to give it a divide by 0 error. I'm going to do if snap size not equal, if snap size dot x is less than or equal to 0, then we're going to say snap size dot x equals 1. 1 is about the minimum size that I'm going with. I'm actually intending it to be all integers in this case. and not decimal places. If you want to do smaller increments, you absolutely can, but you'll have to adjust the math for it. This one's easier, and it happens to be exactly what I need. I'm also using artificial intelligence in Visual Studio to start filling in the next lines for me, so it can figure out the order of these variables. Okay, so now I know I'm not going to end up getting a divide by 0 if I try dividing by any of these values. So now let's start using this. We're going to need to apply our offset, and we're going to need to modify the position. So let's start off by grabbing the position with an offset taken away from it. So we're going to say var pos equals transform.position minus offset. Okay, now we're going to say position.x equals mathf.round to int. So we want to round this up to an integer, and we're going to say snapsize.x divided by, we're going to do the current position.x divided by snapsize.x. And then we're going to multiply it again by snapsize.x. All right, now we'll do the other ones. Position.y equals mathf.round to int. And if I let this sit here for a second, will it figure it out in the AI? Yes, almost. It turned it negative here. Not what I needed. Still got to pay attention to the AI when it's trying to help. .z equals mathf. It's going to figure it out. No. All right, we'll just do that. Round to int pos.z divided by snap size.z times snap size.z. All right, and then finally, we are going to take our position and our new position, set the transform with it, and also add the offset back to it. I can get into an explanation at another point about how that offset actually works. So position, let's go with transform.position equals POS plus offset. All right, great. I have the offset here. Everything is set up on this. Now, one other scenario is the fact that the transform itself does not trigger on validate for this, but transform does let us know when it changes. So I'm going to put an update in here. Private void update. And in this one, if transform.hasChanged, then we're going to call on validate again. All right, that should give us our snapping code. Let's go into the editor. Great, so we're inside of here. Let's go ahead and click on the object, and I am going to make a change so the snap size has a Y of 2. I'll show you why in a second, but if I drag this around right now, that is still just applying it directly. It's not actually doing anything with the object. What did I miss? Let's find out. So we have in here this one. Oh, yes, one other thing. This mono behavior doesn't execute in the editor. So we are going to change this to add the attribute execute always. I'm not using execute in edit mode because Unity is actually planning on getting rid of that one. If you check the documentation, it's noted in there. All right, so I'm going to use, I want execute always. They're pretty much the same thing anyway. All right, execute always will allow it to edit during the editor updates as well. So now if I take this, I can drag it around and it just snaps immediately to wherever I'm dragging it to. I'm not using the snap code capabilities. In fact, if I go over to the snaps and I reset this back to 1, let's just go to there, 1 across the board, and I just click and drag this, it's still doing the 10 by 10. So even if I were holding the control key, it wouldn't be a way to cheat right now. Okay, so we've got that block moving around how we want it to. Now we can start laying out some of the scene. I'm going to duplicate this and pass it over here. Duplicate, pass, duplicate, move. All right, now the reason that I wanted it to have that 2 meter up but 10 to snap on the sides is that when I move this up, I want that platform to be able to be something that a unit might be able to go from one to the next one. So since we have that, let's hit Control S to just save the scene. Also, the lighting doesn't work very well right now that we have several of them. It's hard to see this connection from one to the next one. In fact, let's go to game. Oh, you can't really see anything because the camera is looking at the side view. Let's change the camera to look at it from our perspective right now. So I have the camera selected, and I'm going to do Control-Shift-F. All right, it now looks at it from here, so when I go to game view, I can see these. Now, that doesn't work very well, so let's make a change. I'm going to select platform, and I'm going to expand this out. I'm going to go to spotlight, and let's increase the intensity or the radius a little bit. So you can see which one we're editing right now, and it kind of is starting to bleed over into the next one, which is what I wanted while the corners are still pretty dark. And now let's go back to the root item and apply this override. There, it's now applied, so all of them have it. Excellent. Let's go over to, oh yeah, I'm in scene view. So that puts this particular item there. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to build out some of this level, and I'll just do this one quickly. All right, so I now have the general shape of this level finished. So the next thing that I need is a little bit of decoration. And now I'm not going to do the Blender editing inside of this video, but I will show you, there will be a link here to the separate video where I actually go into how to create it, because this junk tech that I'm going to use is actually pretty easy to apply, and you don't have to be skilled at Blender in order to generate it, which is kind of a great introduction to Blender. All right, so let me bring Blender up so that you can see this. All right, so here's Blender. Let's load up a recent one for Junk 1 Blend. And let's go over to just modeling, and you can see this really weird object. This is incredibly odd, right? The general purpose of it, let me explain why the design is important here. It's basically a cube in the center with 6 different, all the different angles coming out of it produce different shapes of things that have awkward angles and positions, things that appear bent or oddly shaped, like they might be parts of machines, they might be pipes that have been bent or vents that have been dented. It's hard to say. Now, when this gets randomized and rotated to a different point, and you have a whole bunch of them right next to each other, it makes it really hard to tell that there's actually only one low poly model there. So we can use a low poly model in a larger environment. So I'm going to do File, Save As, and we are going to save this to RTS Course D. RTS Course D, cursed, Assets, RTS, and let's go over to, oh, we don't have a models folder. Let's create one. Models. Now with Blender, you do need to make sure that you actually have Blender installed in the same machine as Unity. At least in the past when you did this, Unity would actually depend on some of the Blender libraries in order to decipher the Blender file. All right, so here's Junk 1 in the models folder. I'm going to drag this over onto the scene. Now this is pretty big, and I want to shrink that down a bit. So let's go over to the actual model import section and find its scale factor. I'm going to change that to 0.4. All right, and then hit apply. That shrunk it down pretty well, so now it's much smaller. I'm going to delete that from the scene, and I'll just drag that back in. All right, great. So now I've got this object in here. Now, I also know that I'm going to be repeating this junk element all over the scene. So I want to unpack this as a prefab. because I want to take control of it. And if I start making changes to it, it's not going to let me override them back to this root prefab because the actual file counts as a prefab. So I need to take advantage of that right away. So I'm now going to drag junk1 over into prefabs. And now here we have our prefab. That's the first one in the scene. I also need to organize the scene because this is starting to get cluttered. And let's create an empty environment. Its position is wherever, and I want that to be in the center of the world. So I'm going to reset this. And now I'm going to add a root element to this one. And we're going to another empty, and we're going to call it platforms. So I can start getting rid of all these platforms that are showing up in here. And now I'm going to need another one for junk because we're adding junk in here. So create empty junk. And we're going to drag the first one in here. And now every time I duplicate it, it's going to show up inside of this. All right, so to make this work, we need half of this to be underneath the platform. So only part of it is sticking up. All right, so I'm going to put in a bunch of them around here. And I'm going to start here and hit Control D and then drag it over, Control D, drag it over, Control D, drag it over, etc. And I'm going to start adding a bunch of them to the scene now. So I'm going to do this kind of quick. Now to get this part, I want to rotate a bunch of them at the same time. So I have it on center mode instead of pivot. All right, so inside of this, we now have all of these in place, but they don't look that great. The coloration of this is not good. It doesn't have any texture to it. You can see the repeating pattern quite easily. This just does not appear to have the same type of quality as the environment, the platforms that we're standing on. So let's put some stuff in here to make this more cohesive now. All right, to start out with, let's set some textures. So these are prefab, so I can just take any one of these and let's find the material. The material is using the default material that comes with the model. We're going to change that. So let's find a different material that's going to work better. Let's go over to our materials, which of course has next to nothing. I could try putting platform on one. Actually, let's just do it and see what that looks like. I'm going to override so we can see that in all of them. Actually, let's just dive into this particular one. Revert, and let's go in and zoom in on this actual object, F. There, I'm going to put platform on there, and I don't really like how that worked. The mesh on this stands out too much, so let's go grab a different one. Materials, and now we're going to find a material. Let's try a few of them on here. It's actually a little faster if I just go up to here and start clicking through them this way. Because now I can just start selecting them. Ooh, this looks nice. It's got all the extra, it looks like caution and construction equipment kind of mangled up, which I think is actually kind of nice here. All right, I'm going to go with that. Let me do a quick rotation view to see what I think about this. Well, I can't do that from here. But all of them have this now. And the yellow works here. I like how the yellow is going into this. Now, the pattern is still there. You can see this repeating pattern quite easily. But the color scheme is nice. We can see that the color scheme is setting yellow and grays to be kind of the environment that we're interacting with. The things that basically stay put. Okay, so now we need to get rid of the repeating pattern on this. So to do that, I'm going to go inside of one of these and I'm going to create a new script. I guess over here in the scripts folder, right click, create C# script, and we're going to call this rotator tool. All right, so our rotator tool, which is here, there we go. I'm going to delete some of the extra stuff here, and this is going to be pretty small. This doesn't need to execute always, but I am still going to put the if Unity editor in here because that's the only time we want it to run. If Unity_editor. And now on this one, I'm going to add a menu item, which menu item doesn't exist right now. So I'm going to hit Control dot and bring up using Unity editor. So I added the using statement for Unity editor. And now for the menu item, I'm going to call this tools/apply rotations. All right, now I need a static method. So private static void apply rotations. And inside of here, I want to get every single rotator tool behavior and call this function or do a modification to it. So we're going to say for each var RA, or RT, rotator tool, in GameObject.find objects of type rotator tool. And now for every single one of these, we're going to say rt.transform.rotation equals transform, or sorry, not transform, it's just random.rotation. All right, that's it for this one. So now we're going to go back into our scene. Let's return to the main object. And then from here, we need to apply the rotation. So we need that rotation tool to be on everything. I'm going to go inside of here and I'm going to drag over the rotator tool so it's now part of the default object. And let's back out. And now I want to hit Tools, Apply Rotations. Now that looks like a large pile of junk. So we can see the different elements of junk that are in here. And for a nav mesh, that's going to create plenty of space to be able to walk around, get through the path, and be able to find ways into hidden areas that might have various resources. And then this section that might be holding enemies. But it also hides the repetitive nature. So when I'm looking at this, I don't really see the repeating parts, especially when I turn off the lights. All right, so now that I have these elements in here, I think I want to get a little bit more light into this as well. So I'm going to expand out the junk a little bit, and we are going to, oh, not the junk, sorry. Let's go for a platform piece. We're going to expand the platform, increase the spotlight. Let's go increase the range just a little bit. And then also the intensity. All right, and now let's go back to platform, overrides, apply all. There, that's a little too bright, but it still looks a lot better. It still looks pretty good. Like there's definitely a large pile of junk here. It might do better to have some of this shifted back a little bit. So for that, that would just be additional tweaks to this. But that's effectively the first level. All right, so in the next videos, I'm going to start covering more things like the navigation, selection, and we'll start getting into, well, everything else it takes to build an RTS. I'll talk to you all later.